And on my mind this week is something that I'm sure you've heard about already, which is the demonetization of content on YouTube. And I wanted to give you a different perspective on this topic so we can discuss it further. So in case you haven't heard, a number of popular YouTubers like Phil DeFranco got notices from YouTube this week to say that their content is no longer advertiser friendly. Not all of their content, but specific videos that they had uploaded. And Phil DeFranco in particular is a YouTuber who talks about current events. Sometimes he injects some of his raunchy humor into it, which is always entertaining, but for some reason, based on the topics that he's covering, YouTube has said those things are no longer advertiser friendly and he can't monetize those videos. There is an appeal process, but more than likely a lot of these YouTubers are going to see some of their revenue disappear because it's no longer friendly to big brands. And on the surface, this really is concerning because like my Nintendo example from last week with fair use, in that issue, Nintendo gets to pick and choose who makes money putting up gameplay footage of their video games when they're reviewing them. In this case now, we've got the entire platform determining what topics are suitable for their platform versus not. Now, they're not pulling these videos down, but if I'm trying to do some journalism and covering some current events that might be controversial, I might think twice about doing that and might stick to something safe like doing tech reviews or something like that. So that is a big problem because we still need journalism to exist in this country, and when platforms can determine a whole swath of content because it covers war or something that society needs to talk about is controversial, then it becomes an issue when none of those journalists can actually make any money. And we're seeing fewer and fewer opportunities for real news to get out to people because of all this sensitivity that's going on with how this advertising is placed. And part of the problem is how people perceive advertising based on the way it used to work. So I want to show you how advertising used to work and still does, maybe on television and newspapers, and how it works now. And I actually have a small advertising business that I do on the side where I help small organizations buy advertising on digital platforms because I'm finding that it's very expensive for a lot of these small organizations and businesses to buy stuff, and I try to do it inexpensively along with a few partners of mine, and it's working pretty well in the sense that I've learned a lot from how all this works. I'm going to share some of that knowledge with you now. So typically the way advertising worked back in the old days, for example, is that an advertiser would go and find a TV show, for example, that best fit his or her audience. So in this case, I've got Star Trek: The Next Generation up here. That advertiser knew that the Nielsen rating said a particular demographic watched this show on a regular basis, so they're comfortable saying, okay, I know we've got X amount of people watching this that I'm trying to reach. I'm going to put my money down on that show, and my ads are only going to appear on this wholesome piece of family entertainment. Great for the brand, great for the TV station because they have something very scarce to sell. There's only a limited number of slots available on that show to allow this advertiser to buy from, so there's greater value there. Really worked out great for everybody, but that was the old days. This is how advertising works now, especially on YouTube. So people go to Google with their big sack of money, and they tell Google who they want to reach, and Google goes out and finds them. So whenever you see an ad on this channel or on Phil DeFranco's channel or on anyone else's channel, if I'm not saying those words to you directly of the advertisement, there's been no arrangement with me at all. The brands are not calling me and buying an ad specifically on my channel. In some cases, they might be able to do that, but by and large, the efficient way of advertising now is to do exactly this, where you're going out to Google and having them placing ads directly in front of the people that you are trying to reach. That is how it works. Phil DeFranco doesn't see the ads first. I don't see them first. Nobody sees them. The problem is that people out in the world interpret advertising the way it used to be, that it works like this, and it no longer works like that. And they assume, though, that when the ad shows up in front of them, that brand is endorsing that particular YouTube channel when those ads appear. Yet, what's really happening is that brands are now buying audience and they're not buying publications. That is the big distinction here between 21st century digital advertising and 20th century traditional advertising. But like I said, out in the world, everyone still thinks that there is a direct one-to-one correlation and endorsement between the advertiser and the content that they're placing their stuff on. So now there's a problem here because what will happen is, and I've seen this many times in my own experience, that I'll have a small business or a small organization that sees their ad popping up somewhere that they're not comfortable with because somebody calls them and says, hey, I just saw your ad on blah, 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 blah site, and I think it's horrible that you're advertising there. Meanwhile, they have no control of that because really what we're after is that individual, and wherever that individual happens to go, that's where that ad's going to pop up. And 9 times out of the 10 times that we get those calls, the person calling was on a website they really shouldn't be comfortable being on. But nevertheless, that is how this whole thing comes about. So what YouTube and Google have done is they've put together some tools to help advertisers find safer places for their content to go. And this is an example of one of the screens that you would see in Google AdWords when you're buying YouTube ads. And they have the ability to strip ads away from certain types of content. So some categories are labeled voluntarily, but many are not. And that's where this whole labeling thing that these YouTubers are falling into come into play. In fact, there is two buttons on the ad menu here for tragedy and conflict and sensitive social issues where you can just click those and your ad will never appear on those topics. And in the past, what happened, by the way, this is nothing new. This has been here forever. In the past, what happened is that these YouTubers just were not earning money on those particular videos unbeknownst to them. Now it looks like YouTube is being more transparent in disclosing the fact that they're not going to earn as much money. But I think what's happening here, because they're completely demonetizing, is that they are just turning off sensitive content altogether and not even offering advertisers the ability to put their ads on it at all. I think that's really what is at the core of all of this. And they're not really being so clear on that, because a friend of a friend, I know this is anecdotal, but I think there's some legitimate value to the story here. A friend of a friend had a really cool YouTube channel where he was blowing things up with firearms and explosives, all legally, but he was doing some pretty crazy stuff. And he reached out to me through my friend to see if we could compare notes on what we were earning per 1,000 views on our content. And I was doing much better than he was reviewing tech gadgets, and we were trying to figure out what the reason for that was. And I, having known that these options existed within the YouTube platform and in the Google AdWords platform, I suggested to him to start taking away references to firearms and explosives and other things that might be controversial in his titling. And sure enough, his revenue increased as a result of doing that over time, once the algorithms caught up and everything else. So I think this has been going on for a long time. I think that what's happening now, though, is that YouTube is making a very conscientious decision to just knock it out completely. My gut tells me that this is probably related to political advertising season, because here in the United States, one of the biggest sources of revenue for television stations, and by extension YouTube, is trying to get into the television advertising market essentially, is political advertising. And political campaigns are very nervous about their ads appearing in places that might generate controversy. And I think that's what's driving a lot of this, because it's no coincidence that right before September starts, usually the second week of September is when political ads really kick into high gear. Now we're seeing this change here. I think that's what's really going on. Now let's take a look at another screen here, because I want to show you what an industry this content filtering has become. So this is another advertising engine that I use for non-YouTube stuff. And this includes banner ads as well as video placements on other platforms. And there is an entire market, entire industry around going through all these different places where ads might appear and providing some categorization for them. So in this example, there's a company called Grapeshot here that goes through and tries to categorize as much as they can to help advertisers exclude their content from specific places. You'll see here even things that shouldn't be all that controversial, like military sites or manga sites and other things like that, are also part of this mix. In fact, this list goes well beyond what you see on the screen here. And this really goes to show you just how sensitive brands are to where their stuff is being placed. Even though reality is, they know this, that they're buying the audience, and wherever that audience is, they're going to show up. But people out there still think that advertising is done the old way, which is why all of this is happening in the first place. So it's really a big problem, because I think this is going to tamp down the kind of content that we really need as a society on the web, both globally and here in the United States, to encourage journalism. And here we've got yet another example of the funding being taken out from under content that I think is really important for society to progress in. So hopefully we'll see some happy medium on this, but I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon, because money is always driving the equation here in the 21st century and even in the last century. And I don't think we're going to see big changes to this anytime soon. So unfortunately, this is going to be the law of the land here on YouTube for a long time. And the biggest thing that I want YouTube to do, and I've heard other YouTubers allude to this as well, is they just need to communicate with us and let us know what's going on before they do it. If Phil DeFranco, with how many millions of subscribers, gets blindsided by a big change in policy interpretation by YouTube that could directly impact his living, why isn't he being told? Why don't they just put out a notification to say, hey, we're making these changes, prepare yourselves? Instead, they just drop this stuff on people all the time. And we love to hate them for this reason. And maybe they're making money off of us complaining, because this topic alone has generated probably tens of millions of views this week. But I do think it would be nice for YouTube to really start thinking about the implications of what they're doing on people's livings, because many of us are earning a living, or in my case, a portion of my living, doing this. And I don't like this uncertainty uncertainty here. And the good news is at least we're having some different choices emerging as to where we can place content, but it's still YouTube is really driving a lot of the growth in the independent content industry, and this kind of stuff really freaks me out. So hopefully they get on the ball with this, but I did want to talk about digital advertising, how it works, and I think maybe we should all start working to educate everyone we know who still thinks advertising is done the old way as to how it works now, so they'll be less sensitive to a fact that a brand might show up on a controversial video knowing that that brand didn't place it there explicitly. This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.